Hey, how you doing? This is RJ. Today I have a question to ask, and it's about stories and the structures of stories. And I talk about stories a lot because, well, I'm pretty much a story junkie, I would say. And the thing is that I think that stories have changed, or at the very least the way that we consume stories has changed over the last 20 years. And I think there's a number of reasons for this. And I want to go over the personal reasons why I think this is, and bounce it off you and see if any of you have similar experiences and think that this is the case, because I think this is actually becoming a cultural thing. And I think the way that we consume stories is much different than it was 20 years ago, and I think that is contributing, at the very least in a small part, but maybe in a big way, to why people don't want your normal comic stories anymore. Your normal Marvel and DC, Batman, Superman, Captain America, Spider-Man, big epic stories. I think that those are gone by the wayside, at the very least for a little while. It's been put aside. Now, the reason why I thought about this was because, well, I went into my comic shop this week, and I always go to the dollar bin to see what's there because there's always new stuff. And there was a bunch of new stuff. And I only buy $10 to $15 a week. I don't want to buy really more than $15. Usually only 10. I limit myself to $10 because, well, I don't want to hog all the good stuff. I mean, it's kind of greedy. So I just have to pick out which ones I think are the best and which ones I know that if I leave, someone else might pick it up. And I whittled it down to 15 because there was at least 30 that I looked at and really wanted to get. But I whittled it down to 15 this week, and 8 of them were independent books which I had never heard of before and had characters I've never heard of before, and they were just stories that I was only going to get to read one comic of them. I mean, they weren't one-shots. They were, number 22 of something, number 6 of something, number 3 of something. I would never get to actually read the entire story. And yet, I could buy entire runs of comics from Marvel and DC in my dollar box and just buy something with an epic story that I could follow. Entire runs of these kinds of comics from Marvel and DC. And yet, when it really came down to it, I wanted the independent books more. And I bought the 6 or 7 independent books, and I did buy one run of a Marvel book from 2013. And the thing was, it got me thinking. I really wanted to read those independent books a lot more than even the run of Marvel books that I bought. And it's not just because of the story either. I mean, it could be a good story. It's from 2013, before really the SJW nonsense took super hold on Marvel. But I think the reason is because the way that I consume stories, and I would say that North America has started to consume stories, has changed over the last 20 years. And we want small stories, not big epic stories anymore. Now, again, I'll give you a couple of reasons why, and some of them are personal and some of them are observations. But I would say that, well, when I started abandoning North American products, because I started abandoning them around 20 years ago, abandoning North American comics, abandoning North American movies, abandoning North American television, I would go to other sources from other countries. And I could do that because, well, the internet can provide you with pretty much anything now from any place. And even if you just pick the cream of the crop of something small like fantasy and fiction from another country, you could spend most of the rest of your life going through that. So you have plenty to pick from. And that's what I did. And if you don't mind reading things that are translated or watching dubbed or subbed things, then go ahead and do that. But the thing is that most other countries don't produce stories like North American stories. They're not epic stories. They have a small budget. They do what they can with that small budget, and they usually produce something small. A show that's 12 shows, maybe 24. That's it. And you're never going to see those characters ever again. Or movies where you're not going to get a sequel. Or books. I know that you can get some manga that go on forever and ever, but for the most part, the ones that I ran into and that I really liked, they were just small things. And I got used to consuming those kinds of stories. Now, I still kind of yearned for your epic kind of stories. And I thought to myself, especially when I was reading manga or watching anime, I think to myself, well, you know what? The protagonist in all of these books is pretty much the same. Just some bland character. And I kind of imagine the fact that, it's just the same protagonist over and over again. It's the same person. He's just in a different dimension kind of thing, right? So I could think of it as being a continuation of the story. Just another dimension of this story where you have different characters around him. That's what I thought. That's the way originally I had thought about it. But I thought to myself after I was looking at these independent books, I kind of got hooked on small stories again. Not big, large, epic stories. And I think that I'm okay with reading one book out of whoever knows how many were in this line, because I don't, when I picked up these things from the dollar box, because I'd say a great story, not a good story, but a great story, has something very unique attached to it. A good story makes you feel satisfied when you get to the end of it, but a great story not just makes you feel satisfied, but keeps you thinking about that story long after you finish the story. And you create these scenarios in your head about what might happen next, or what might have happened in the off-scene places where you don't get to see what happened. And you think about all of these things. That's what a great story does. And so I don't mind reading one book out of 20 and never getting to read any more if it's a good story, because I can think about the story. If it's a great story, I'll just think about it. I'll make up my own ending. And I think that make up your own ending comes a lot from the new video games that are out now. I mean, they have advanced massively over the last 20 years. And to some extent, you become the author of the story that you are participating in when you're playing one of these games. I mean, back 20 years ago, you could have your RPGs, right? There weren't MMO RPGs. There would just be MUDs if you wanted to do D&D stuff. But you got to be the author of your own story to some extent. There was set things that you couldn't alter, but you got to be an author of that story. And I think people are getting used to being authors of their own story in that sense as well. If they don't get to the end of the story, it's okay. They can come up with their own ending. And all of these things, I'd say, play into the fact that North American epic stories are just on the way out, if they're not already out. People don't really want them anymore. People have begun to consume so much from outside North America, because North America has, these large pots of money to draw from. You can make a show that's 10 seasons long. You can make a movie that has 6 or 7 sequels to it. You can have a comic that has been running for 40 years. You can have characters that are even older than that and have them kept going, because you have a pot of money to draw from. And people in America, I don't know why, but seem to be attracted to these marathon kind of stories. But the people who are outside of North America with their small little bit of money did the best as they could with their little story, and they had to pack as much as they could into it, and it had to compete with a whole bunch of other little stories, so they had to make it supremely good if they could. You can't waste that money. So they had a tighter market, I would say, in story development at the very least. So they would concentrate on the story. You realize it's only going to last for 12 episodes or so. So you got to get everything into that. You got to cut the fat. You got to make sure that it is going to appeal to someone so much and be a great story that they are going to want to buy your next product. Not the next story of these characters, not the next story in this universe, the next product that you are producing as a writer, as a producer, anything like that. They concentrated on making great stories. Now, certainly it doesn't always happen that way. They're not always great stories. There's plenty of stuff that fall by the wayside. But honestly, I want to know if anybody else recognizes this in the world or in North America today, that epic stories aren't something that people are being attracted to anymore. Sure, there are still some of them out there, and sure, you might find them every once in a while making a lot of money, but I don't think it's the norm anymore. And I think that contributes a lot to what's going on with Marvel and DC. And the independent producers, you need to stop trying to be Marvel and DC. You need to look at other markets where the small guy is all that there is, and imitate those markets, because they are the ones who have mastered this art of making a small story a great story and getting people drawn back into their products rather than this one character. Anyway, I really wanted to do this small video because I found that fascinating to think about, and I'd like someone else's take on it. Tell me in the comments whether or not you noticed this, whether you think this is true. And if I gave you anything new to think about, hit like. Hit the shield in the lower right hand corner of your screen to subscribe. And like I said, leave me a message, leave me a comment. Tell me what you think. Alright, I'll see you later. Bye.